Good morning. My name is Jeremiah Lindeman, and I work with the Esri training team here in Redlands, California. I will also be assisted by Krista Page, who also works in the training team. We would like to welcome you all to today's live training seminar entitled What's New in ArcGIS 9. So before we get started, what exactly is ArcGIS? Well, the broad definition of ArcGIS really isn't changing. And that ArcGIS is really a family of products that work together to get your GIS tasks done. Now, most of you are familiar with working with applications such as Arcmap and Catalog. Now, this is part of the ArcGIS desktop product, just part of the family of products that work together. This is what most of today's live training seminar will be discussing. There are also many other products that work together with ArcGIS. Many of you use ArcIMS and ArcSDE. And there are also a couple new products out at ArcGIS 9 as well, called Arcgis Server and the ArcGIS Engine Developer Kit. We'll be taking a brief look at these products towards the end of the seminar. Again, most of today's seminar will be focusing on ArcGIS Desktop and what is new to ArcGIS 9. So exactly what is new to ArcGIS 9? Well, there's a lot of new functionality in ArcGIS 9. There's a wealth of new tools that will help get your GIS workflows accomplished more efficiently and easily. We don't have time to go over everything today because we're limited to about an hour's worth of time, but we're going to skim the surface on the major highlights of ArcGIS 9. First of all, there are many new usability enhancements. There's a data interoperability extension, which will allow you to work with additional spatial data formats. A huge geoprocessing framework that includes hundreds of tools and many different ways to use the tools. Many new labeling and annotation enhancements. Geo Database enhancements. Easier ways to share data that's within the Geo Database. The ability to store raster data inside the Geo Database. 3D enhancements. A neat new application called ArcGlobe that really makes powerful 3D displays and different ways to render our 3D symbols. New options for developers. And again, these are in the new products that will be coming out, which we will be taking a quick look at towards the end of today. And again, much, much more. We just can't go over everything due to time constraints. But we are going to hit the major topics that we've listed on this slide today. So how are we going to work things today? Well, we're going to break the seminar up into 4 main topics. First, we're going to look at labeling and working with your data. Second, we'll be looking at the Geoprocessing Framework. Third, we'll look at the 3D visualization enhancements. Then lastly, we'll look at the additional new products. Now what we'll do is we'll go over each topic by discussing them through slides. We'll show you a software demonstration. We'll review, and then we'll also have a question and answer period. Now this is where we can interact with you and help answer some of your questions. So Chris and I will be fielding the questions that you ask to us during that time. So let's get started with our very first topic, labeling and working with data. So what we're going to look at within this topic are the labeling and annotation enhancements. Much easier ways for working with our labels. There's a new labeling toolbar that has a lot more functionality within it. A new Mapplex extension, which we can further define how our labels will be placed. New annotation capabilities, and geodatabase enhancements, the ability to store raster data in a personal geodatabase. XML import and export of our data, and a data interoperability extension. So let's look at some of these topics. Before we actually get into those topics specifically, there's a lot of functionality that's built into the system that will simply improve productivity when you don't really have to relearn the software. Things work much quicker, and there's a lot of new shortcuts that help you speed up things. There's tools to increase productivity. So if you're working in layout mode, there's a toggle draft mode. And if you're in the data view, there's a pause drawing button. These buttons will basically put on a temporary suspension on everything that's going on in either the data view or layout view. That way you can interact with Arcmap without having to wait for things to redraw or refresh, especially if you have a lot of layers or a lot of raster data. Makes your work much more efficiently. Keyboard shortcuts. It's much faster to manipulate layers and data frames now through new keyboard shortcuts. And I'll show you where these are all documented later on. You can drag and drop multiple layers between data frames and between applications. Something that we've all felt your pain with before are faster startup times. So you know, when working with ArcGIS 8, it takes a little while for Arcmap or ArcCatalog to start up. These startup times have been much more improved, so they start up right away. Also, things such as clicking on the Add Data button works much quicker as well. So you guys will really like these improvements. Improved print and page setup dialogues, new export options available, and again, much, much more. We will show you resources where you can get further information about all the enhancements to ArcGIS 9 concerning usability and quality enhancements towards the end of the seminar. Okay, we mentioned there's many new labeling enhancements. So at ArcGIS 8, if I go into Arcmap and I want to label a layer in my table of contents, I would right-click on that layer, go into the properties, and set up all the labeling criteria. Well, new at 9, there's a new toolbar called the Labeling Toolbar. This Labeling Toolbar has a lot of new functionality on it. For instance, we can lock down the labels, so we can not have the labels constantly redraw when I'm panning or zooming around. I can also view unplaced labels to get a quick sneak peek at what I'm missing. But what's also neat is one of the buttons is called the Label Manager. Now this is a centralized location for managing all of the labels within my data frame. So rather than right-click on each individual layer, go to the properties, now I get one centralized environment where I can access all the properties for the labels for all my layers at once. Much more efficient way for working with my labels. We also mentioned that there's many new techniques, many new rules that we can set up for how to place our labels. Some of this is included within the core product of ArcGIS. There's also a new Maplex extension. Now, the Maplex extension is an optional extension that allows high-quality label creation. Now, basically what you're doing is you're just setting up more rules, how your label should be replaced. So we're just going to go over a few of those rules today. For instance, abbreviation dictionaries. Wherever there is the word road, we can abbreviate it to RD. It's not going to abbreviate it if it doesn't have to, but if it's running out of room on the screen, it will abbreviate it to whatever you specify. Same concept with stacking labels. If you're running out of room, it will stack it appropriately. Sometimes we have very small polygons. Say you want to label all your polygons in a font that has a size 12 font. Well, if you have a really small polygon and that 12 size font can't fit inside that polygon, you can say, well, let's reduce that font up to an 8-point font so it can fit inside that polygon. So again, there's a lot more rules that we can set up with Maplex to put these high quality labels on our map. And we just went over a few examples here. Typically, after we create labels, we take those labels and we convert them to annotation. Working with annotation is much, much more easier at ArcGIS 9. So at 8.3, if I have label classes, for instance, if I have cities that I'm labeling, and I want to label all my capital cities in a bright red font, and I want to label all my other cities in a smaller black font, well, each one of those label classes would become its own annotation feature class. Well, at ArcGIS 9, you have the ability to take label classes and store them as multiple annotation classes inside a feature class. That way I don't have to bring in multiple feature classes into my Arcmap session. I can just work with the one feature class and work with all the multiple annotation classes that are stored within that. Also new with working with annotation is working with the annotation that is already there. There's going to be a new annotation toolbar. Now this is a central location for creating and editing annotation. This is designed to work in conjunction with the editing toolbar. So there's many tools on here for creating brand new annotation, as well as editing existing annotation. There's an edit annotation tool, and this will give you a quick preview of what the annotation looks like and how you can change it. And you can make the changes through this dialog box. Something else that's really neat is we can do batch changes. So I can select a whole bunch of pieces of annotation and make changes all at once to all those pieces of annotation through this one dialog. Okay, so now we'd like to interact with you a little bit, and we're going to ask you a review question. So we'd like you to locate the review question link in the upper left corner of your browser window. So go ahead and click this link now. So the question we'd like to ask you is, which of the following is a new way to create a label class in ArcGIS 9? Again, I gave the example of a label class being labeling all the capital cities in a bright red font and all the other cities in a darker black font. Would you A, right-click the layer and choose Properties, B, use the labeling toolbar and then Label Manager, C, convert your labels to Annotation, D, use the new Maplex extension. So to submit your answer, click the A, B, C, or D, and then click the Send button. We'll be coming back to this answer in just a few slides. Okay, the topic of this seminar was this session was also to work with your data. Many of you are working with Geo Database data. Now there's a new way for sharing that information, and this is through an XML Data Interchange. So users have been asking for an open way to exchange geodatabase information for quite a while now. This is what XML does. XML has a well-defined syntax and semantics, and it conforms to a set of standards. People are using XML for all types of applications right now. So what XML does is we can take a geodatabase, either personal or enterprise, and we can export the contents of that geodatabase to an XML file. We can either take just specific feature classes from the geodatabase or the entire representation of the geodatabase, including the schema, such as topologies, domains, how all of our feature classes are structured. So then we can take this XML file and we can import it to other geodatabases. So this makes it, for one, this makes it an easy way to share information, but it's also an open way because you can open up this XML file in anything. For instance, this slide is showing how an XML file might look in a web browser, and you can see that all the information of the geodatabase is stored in the XML file, the geometry, the attributes, and everything. So developers have access to this information, and they can pull out that information in any way that they want. But it's also just a really easy way to share information by importing it into other geodatabases. Okay, out of the box, we know that ArcGIS supports a wide variety of spatial data formats. Shortly after the initial ArcGIS 9 release will be the Data Interoperability extension. Now this basically covers all your bases for any spatial data format you can imagine. It integrates multiple data formats, both open and proprietary sources, directly into your GIS. So you get a direct read of more than 65 spatial data formats, and you can also export to more than 50 formats. So some of the formats listed on this slide you may currently be using, so this may be useful to you. Also with the extension, you'll have the ability to diagram and model custom spatial data formats. For instance, this diagram is taking a CSV file, a comma-separated value file, basically a text file with just a bunch of latitude and longitude points. So what we've done is we've constructed a model that will tell how it should read that CSV file. We could take those points and automatically connect them together so they're rendered as lines when we bring them into Arcmap on the fly. Okay, so a few moments ago we asked you a review question. So to view the results, click the review question link in the upper left corner of your browser window. So we ask you, which of the following is a new way to create a label class at ArcGIS 9? And it looks like most of you got this right. About 75% of you. You said use a new labeling toolbar and label manager. So the label manager allows you to assign class definitions, your label class definitions for all of your layers in your table of contents. Now there are actually two answers to this, because A is how you would do it at 8.3. You would right-click the layer and choose Properties, and that's still true. So the way you did it in 8, you can also do it, but we also offer you a new environment to do it in. Now C and D, convert your labels to annotation, and using the new Maplex extension, this is just other ways of working with labels or annotation. Okay, moving on to working with our data, there are more enhancements to the geodatabase. So we have the ability to work with raster data inside the personal geodatabase. Now if you're working with an enterprise SDE database, you've been able to store raster data all along. But new at ArcGIS 9, we're giving you the ability to store raster data inside the personal geodatabase. Now, there is a size limit on a personal geodatabase at 2 gigabytes. So it's not actually storing the raster data internally by the personal geodatabase. But what the geodatabase is doing is it's managing it. So the raster is still being stored outside of the geodatabase, but it provides a nice central location where you can see all your data in one location. So when you view this personal geodatabase with ArcGIS tools, it will appear as if the raster data is inside the geodatabase. Also, when I copy the geodatabase to another directory or move it around, it's going to be smart enough to take that raster data with it since it is managed. We'll also have the ability to store raster catalogs inside both the personal and enterprise geodatabase. Now, a raster catalog is basically a collection of a bunch of raster data sets. Usually you have adjacent raster data sets that you want to keep as separate entities. That's what a raster catalog will do. So these are very easy to build, and we have more tools for viewing these raster catalogs, as we see within ArcCatalog and also within Arcmap. And the third way of working with raster data in the geodatabase is through the Raster Attribute. Now this is for feature classes. It's basically a new field type that I can add to any feature class. So for instance, if I have a feature class of parcels, I can add a new raster column to the table of that feature class that I can add associated raster data sets to. Maybe I want to add the real estate picture of the house for each individual parcel. I can do that through the Raster Attribute. Now this is in a way analogous to a hyperlink, but again we can set it up so the geodatabase will manage all this raster data, all the raster data sets for us as well. Speaking of raster, there are many raster enhancements, not just with the personal geodatabase, but working with raster in general. There are many more raster tools to complete your work. For instance, if you want to mosaic, clip, merge, transform your raster data sets, you can do that. Now, a lot of this functionality was available with the Spatial Analyst extension, but a lot of people have been asking for this functionality that don't necessarily need the Spatial Analyst, so these tools have now been included. Some of them even at the ArcView level, for instance, clipping your raster data sets. We also get a partial pyramid creation for ArcSDE raster. So if you've been working with ArcSDE, you had to have all your data loaded if you wanted to work with it and then build pyramids. Now you can start building pyramids, continue to load your data, and continue to work with your data. There are also many limitations to the grid model, ESRI's native format for the raster, such as a file size limit and a limit to grids you can use in a session. Those limitations no longer exist. When we access property dialogues, for instance, if I go into ArcCatalog and I look at the properties for a raster, I get all that on one property sheet, so I don't have to toggle back and forth through many tabs. All the information is provided up front for you. And we get many more additional rendering capabilities for working with raster data as well. So now what we'd like to do is break into a software demonstration. So what we've looked at so far are labeling and working with your data. So we're going to look at a labeling demo. But before we do that, I mentioned that there was some usability enhancements and keyboard shortcuts. For instance, I have a data frame that I have opened right now. If I just simply select some layers that I want to turn on and off, rather than unchecking them, I can just simply press the space bar. It's going to turn them on or off every time I press the space bar. Another usability enhancements, if I want to move to a different data frame, I press Alt on my keyboard, and I just click another data frame. It activates it right away. So we're just taking the interaction from the mouse away if people prefer to stick to the keyboard. So this should comfort you right now that we're looking at an Arcmap document. Very much similar to what you're looking at within ArcGIS 8.3. So you don't have to relearn the software with this release. Everything for the most part is the same. We're just making it easier for you to use and more tools for you to work with your data. Now, if I want to label some of the feature classes, we're looking at some data around Sequoia National Park. If I want to label these highways that I see here, I can right-click on the primary roads feature class and go to properties, set up all the labeling criteria for that one layer. But what I can also do, I can now bring up a new toolbar called the labeling toolbar. So with this labeling toolbar, there are many different tools on the labeling toolbar. One of the tools is the label manager, which I will click right now. Notice that the Label Manager lists all the layers in my table of contents. It also lets me turn on or off the labels, as well as set up all the properties for that label. So we were looking at the primary roads. Right now we just have one label class. Everything's being labeled the same. But what I could also do is I could go in and I say, let's make a new label class. So I'm going to create a new label class called Close Range. And I'll add that. So with my Close Range label class, let's say for this label class, let's change everything to have a bright red font. And let's maybe bump up the font a little bit and give it a bold color. So we have two label classes. We could either set up expressions for attributes to pull out, but I'm just going to set up a scale range. So for the Close Range, I'm going to set up the scale range to not show them when I'm in beyond 1 to 300,000. I'll click OK. Now my default label class is being shown at all locations, so likewise I will also want to set its scale range to be the opposite. So when I'm out beyond 1 to 300,000. Okay, so I'm out beyond for my default label class, and for my Close Range, I'm in beyond 300,000. I'll click OK. Notice that my Close Range automatically appears in the bright red font, but as I zoom in beyond a scale of 1 to 300,000, I will start to see that those labels are now in a darker red font. So it's actually looking at that scale range that I set up. So let's look at some of the other tools on the labeling toolbar. One of them is to view unplaced labels. When I view unplaced labels, all labels that aren't being placed, for instance the streams or the highways, the two layers that I'm labeling, are in a bright red font. That way I can get a quick view of what's not being placed. Okay, let's zoom back out to the previous extent, the full extent that we were at. So that's a real quick look at labeling. Now new at 9 is a new optional extension called the Maplex extension. So I'm going to choose to use this Maplex extension. Now what the Maplex extension is doing is providing more rules how our labels should be placed. So automatically more labels are placed on my map as soon as I start to choose to use that extension because I've defined more rules. One of the things we mentioned that we can do with the Maplex extension is create abbreviation dictionaries. For instance, everywhere where I have the word highway, that's taking up quite a bit of screen real estate. So let's go into labeling, choose abbreviation dictionaries. I'm going to create a brand new abbreviation dictionary called freeway abbreviation, and I'm going to add a row. So every time I see the word highway, I want to change it to HWY. I'll click OK. Nothing has been changed yet. All I've done is created the abbreviation dictionary. I'm going to go into the properties, go back into my label manager. I want to apply that abbreviation only to the Close Range, the label class that I'm viewing right now. So I'll set up the properties to abbreviate the labels based upon the freeway abbreviation, click OK, and apply those. Notice that all my freeways are now abbreviated. So that's a quick look at some of the labeling enhancements. Again, many more and annotation enhancements as well. We're actually going to be having a live training seminar on the annotation enhancements in June. So we'll be going over much more detail in that as well. We'll give you more information on that towards the end of today's seminar. Okay, so let's break out here now and let's interact with you some more. Some of you have already been asking some questions, and we'd like to answer some of those questions now. So many new features have made labeling easier. We have seen that. New centralized location for working with our labels. The Maplex extension offers more labeling control, how our labels should be placed. There are more tools for editing and creating annotation. Then we also looked at some geodatabase enhancements. We saw that there's the ability to store raster data in the personal geodatabase. More tools for working with raster data. And the XML interchange provides an open way to share geodatabase information. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Krista, and she's going to start off with answering some of the questions.
Okay, Jeff from Las Vegas is asking, can you query the raster catalog? In Arcmap, I would like to perform a definition query so only a few images from the raster catalog are displayed. Actually, Jeff, with ArcGIS 9.0, we now store vector footprints with each one of our raster datasets. That means you can now perform a query of any type, a select by attribute, a select by location, or you can bring that catalog into Arcmap and perform a definition query. That will work. Miguel asks, how efficient is XML with huge attribute tables? Isn't it slower? Well, Miguel, the way that the XML will work is the bigger your attribute tables, the longer it will take to convert to an XML format, and the bigger that XML file will be. However, we have a nice option with the export in that you can actually send it out to a zip file, which will make your XML files much smaller and easier to distribute. Peter asks, will there be a way to convert old coverage-based annotation to the new annotation feature class? Peter, with ArcGIS 9.0, we have a brand new geoprocessing tool that will allow you to convert coverage annotation to geodatabase annotation. We also have a tool that will allow you to convert CAD annotation to geodatabase annotation. Bruce from Boise, Idaho asks, does annotation apply only to feature classes in a geodatabase, or can it apply to shapefiles also? Bruce, annotation only applies to feature classes in a geodatabase. Now I'll turn it back over to Jeremiah.
Okay, I'm going to cap it off with one more question here. Jeff from Las Vegas asks, will ArcGIS 9 support the ability to store and view digital camera pictures within a field in the geodatabase? For instance, where pictures are stored, not linked within the geodatabase. Yes, ArcGIS 9 will have the ability to do this. As I mentioned, there's a new field type that we can set up within feature classes of the geodatabase that will be of type raster. Now, those fields we can set up to be managed within the geodatabase, so the geodatabase will actually manage those raster data sets around. Okay, great. Keep those questions coming in. We'll have a couple more review Q&A sessions where we will be answering some of those questions. Now we'd like to move on to the second topic, and this is geoprocessing. This is definitely one of my favorite pieces of ArcGIS 9, and this is a really huge framework. What we're going to look at is the new geoprocessing framework. This framework includes hundreds of tools to get your work done. Also, there are many different ways of running these tools, through Model Builder, Command Line, and writing scripts. So let's take a look at these. First of all, what is geoprocessing? Many of you are probably thinking right now, well, I've used a geoprocessing wizard within Arcmap, such as doing a clip or an overlay. But really, geoprocessing is much larger than that. Geoprocessing, we're taking our spatial data. So we know we can have all types of spatial data. We can have attribute tables, we can have feature classes, we can have topologies. All these are examples of data that we might want to use with our spatial data. So what geoprocessing is doing is running some type of spatial operation on that geographic data. So there are many examples of this. We can run a projection that's creating new output. We can also run data management tools, which is simply just adding a field to the feature class or a table. That's an example of geoprocessing as well. Conversion tools, converting from one format to another. We can set up data management to do a whole bunch of things at once. For instance, take all the shapefiles within a folder and clip them all to a specific data set and move them to the personal geodatabase. Maybe I want to add and calculate some fields. I can automate that workflow. Then, of course, our typical geospatial analysis, such as running a buffer or an overlay, such as a union or intersect. All of these are examples of geoprocessing. So how does geoprocessing relate to ArcGIS 9? Well, we're going to be working with the geoprocessing tools through Arc Toolbox. Now, many are familiar with using Arc Toolbox at ArcGIS 8 as a separate application. At ArcGIS 9, Arc Toolbox will no longer be a separate application. Rather, it will be a dockable window that will reside in an application. So it will be available in Arcmap or Arc Catalog, or some of the 3D Analyst applications we'll talk about in a moment. Working with the tools inside Arc Toolbox is much the same, and then I go find the tool and I can double click on it to execute it. However, we might see some different types of tools in here. So we're going to see a tool as just a single geoprocessing operation. We're going to have system tools. These are tools that Esri provides you. But we might also see models and scripts inside of Arc Toolbox. Now these are also tools that ESRI will provide you as well, but you can also create models and scripts on your own. We'll discuss that in a moment. You can also create your own custom-built tools with Arc objects and place them inside Arc Toolbox as well. So how to use the Geoprocessing Framework? Again, as I mentioned, there's hundreds of tools inside Arc Toolbox. How you want to use a tool is really up to you. Most of our users will probably find it efficient enough to go find the tool they want, double-click on it, and find the dialog, and fill in the parameters and execute that dialog, and it will produce the output as you want. So that's what we see on the left. It's just a dialog representation of the tool. But I can also take that very same tool that's inside Arc Toolbox. I can run it inside a model. I can call it from the command line, or I can also call it from a script. So how you run the tool is up to you, whatever best suits your needs. So let's talk a little bit more about running the tools in the different environments. We mentioned we have Model Builder. Now Model Builder is just another piece of functionality that's included at all license levels of ArcGIS. It's used for very fast analysis. It offers a very nice drag and drop environment, so I can drag both my data and my tools inside a Model Builder. It provides a great graphical documentation of our work. So what I'm doing is I'm basically connecting a bunch of tools together. Now a lot of times we as GIS analysts, we make some type of end result, and we go and we present that end result to other non-GIS users. Having a nice graphical documentation provides a source so we can say this is where our data came from. Really why people want to use Model Builder is for processing multiple tools at once. Rather than opening up a bunch of dialogues, I can just say run my entire model, and it might be running 10 different tools all at once. Now this is really nice if I'm going out, I'm collecting daily data. And with that data, I'm adding some fields, calculating some fields, maybe I'm intersecting it with other data, converting it to another spatial data format. I can set up that workflow inside of a model and take that same model and apply it to different data. So I can run that model day after day as I get new data. Nice way to establish workflows. Also mention that we have a command line environment. Now the command line environment is going to execute the tool the exact same way you would see it through a dialog, but it's just providing a different mechanism of executing the tool. So you run the tools from the interface without dialogues. It saves times for users that have a keyboard preference, and Arcinfo workstation users will find this a very similar environment to what they are used to. So we've looked at so far how we can write or how we can use tools through dialogues. We can take tools and put them inside Model Builder, and we can run tools from the command line. The fourth way we can use tools is by writing scripts. Now, we can write scripts in any language that has a COM interpreter. Now, COM is just the technology that Arcobjects that builds our software is built upon. So really, you have many choices. The choice is yours how you want to write the script, in what language. Some of the more popular ones that you'll see are Python, VBScript, JScript, and Perl. Again, you have the choice what you want to use. You can also use these geoprocessing tools in any programming language that you may be using right now. So why would you write a script? Well, a script offers the same advantages that our models do. They provide a nice graphical documentation. Scripts are pretty easy to read through. We can connect a whole bunch of tools at once. But they also offer additional advantages over models, and that we can perform batch processing. For instance, take all the shapefiles within one directory and clip them all at once. Maybe add a field as well. Run a whole bunch of operations to a whole bunch of data sets all at once. I can also branch based upon conditions. So for my input, run one tool if the shape type is going to be a point. Run a different tool if it's going to be a point or a polyline or a polygon. We can also set up delayed processing with our scripts. For instance, if I have a script that's calling 25 tools, it might take a little time to execute that script as it's running on a lot of different data as well. I can take that script and say, let's run this at 12 o'clock over my lunch hour while I'm not at my machine. Again, it also provides a very familiar environment for AML users as well. So let's take a look at this geoprocessing environment. Just a real quick tour of it. Again, we see a very similar looking environment. What we're looking at is Arcmap. So how do we access the Geoprocessing Framework? How do we access Arc Toolbox? Arc Toolbox, as I mentioned, is a dockable window. I just click on this button here to show Arc Toolbox. And again, I can drag and drop it to any location of my application. Just as a matter of personal preference, I like it right below the table of contents. So let's look at some scenarios here. For instance, I have some data here that shows major freeways. I also have data for roads within this study area. Now maybe this county has received monies to update roads, and they want to update the roads that are the closest to the highways. So what we want to do is we want to find all the roads that are closest to the yellow freeways within the map. So what we're going to do here is, let's first find a spatial distance operator from the freeways. Many of you are probably already thinking buffer. So I'm going to go find the buffer tool. So with this tool, I can just simply open it up by right-clicking on it, choosing open, or double-clicking on it, and then that opens up the tool. Now these tools have been drastically enhanced, so they have a nicer help system. We can also browse for data, but what's really neat is if I'm working within Arcmap, I get a listing of all the layers in my table of contents. So I want to buffer my freeways. I'll accept the default output. I'm going to buffer them by 1,000 meters. And I'm going to dissolve all these buffers. I'll click OK. And what I see is a progress dialog that is letting me know that the tool is executing. It will let me know how long it took to execute the tool. So I'll just go ahead and close this. When I run tools from Arcmap, I have the choice to automatically add the output to the table of contents. So it has a nice interaction environment with Arcmap as well. All the tools do. So now I have a buffer around my freeways. How do I find the roads that are within those freeways? Again, many of you are probably thinking about classic overlay operations. We're looking at a clip operation. So I could go ahead and clip those roads based upon the highway buffer. I'm going to open up the clip tool. I could go ahead and say, well, let's take my roads, let's clip them based upon the freeway buffer, and we're going to write the output. But I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to hit cancel, and instead, I'm going to execute that exact same tool through the command line. So again, the command line is another dockable window. We see it at the bottom of the application here. Here, I have two parts. I have all messages that tell me about what tools I've executed within this session, but I also have a command line prompt where I can type in tools. Notice I get a listing of all tools inside the Arc Toolbox. And I can use keyboard shortcuts to automatically type them in. So let's go ahead and clip my roads based upon the freeway buffer, and I'm just going to create a new feature class called roadbuff1. I'm going to make a shapefile. I could also write it to a Geo Database if I like. I'll hit enter. Messages start appearing inside the command line window. And again, when the tool gets done executing, I'm going to turn off my roads to more clearly see them. But even though I execute at the command line, the output automatically gets added to the table of contents of Arcmap. So we have this nice integration of working with Arc Toolbox tools, either from the dialogues or the command line. So I'm going to go ahead and close this tool. Let's go ahead and uncheck these layers now. Let's look at another scenario. For instance, if I want to find the best way to get from point A to point B, well, I could go in a straight line distance, but there might be other factors I want to consider. For instance, what's going to be the fastest way to get there, considering where roads are, where slopes are. I don't want to go where there's high slopes. I want to go where there's minimum vegetation, and for examples like that. So what I can do is I can set up a whole bunch of tools inside of a model. So here's a custom toolbox that I created, and we also put in a model inside this toolbox. Now what this model has is essentially a bunch of different tools. So each one of these yellow bricks is a tool that's inside of our toolbox. These just happen to be spatial analyst extension tools. These also could be data management tools, such as adding domains, adding topologies. I could put the clip and buffer operation inside the model if I wanted to. We also have data that's from our table of contents, and then data that's being created from that tool. So I'm just chaining essentially a whole bunch of tools together. then my final output I'm choosing to add to the display of Arcmap. So what I have here is 3 tools all at once. I can take this model and say, let's run the entire model. Notice that it recognizes what tool is being executed. And my little progress dialog box is telling me when the model has been finished executing. So I'll go ahead and close this for now. And let's minimize this and look at the final output that was created. We'll see that this model then told me, based upon the criteria that I set up, what is the quickest way to get from point A to point B. What's really nice about this model then is I could take this model, I have my workflow established, and I could apply it to other data. So I can easily establish workflows. So we looked at running tools from dialogues, running them from the command line, and also placing them inside models. Again, the fourth way was to run scripts. Now I'm not going to create a script, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my model, I'm going to export it to a script. So we have the choice of exporting to some of the more popular scripting languages. I'm going to choose the Python script. It's going to ask me where do I want to put it. I'll just call it Jeremiah in the C root directory. We'll save it. Let's go open up Windows Explorer and let's take a look at what a script is all about. So let's open up this script. What we see open is Python Win. It's actually an application that allows you to easily create Python scripts. So what this script is doing is it's setting up some variables for what data I want to use. And it's also calling the exact same tools that I placed inside the model. So this has a nice workflow that I put within my model, but after I've executed it from my model and have my basic workflow, I could put in further additional things, such as branching or looping within inside this script to easily accomplish my GIS task. Okay. So that was a really quick sneak preview of the geoprocessing environment. Again, we only looked at a handful of tools. There are really hundreds of tools available for you, and we just looked at a very few of them. So again, we'd like to break here and go on to another review and Q&A period. So what we saw was geoprocessing provides hundreds of tools available to you. So many different types of tools for you to get your job done. We were looking at some spatial analyst tools and some basic geoprocessing spatial operations. There are many different ways to execute tools as well. We can execute a tool as a dialogue. Many of you might find this efficient enough because you just need a one-time operation. Some of you might find the keyboard to be more efficient. You prefer to use a keyboard, so you use a command line. If you want a common workflow you'll be using over and over, or you want a complete graphical representation, put your tools inside a model builder. You can create your own custom models. And again, scripts will do the same thing that models will do for you, and they offer a little bit more functionality. So again, at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Krista Page again, and she's going to answer a few questions.
Okay, I've been getting a lot of questions in on the release date for ArcGIS 9 software. Jason asks, and Stuart from Fresno asks, and we are currently manufacturing our software, and we expect to be shipping June 1st. Mohammed has been asking several questions on the ability to edit coverage data inside of ArcGIS 9.0. Well, Mohammed, at 9.0, just like at 8.3, we are recommending that you edit your coverage data in Arcinfo Workstation. Arcinfo Workstation still ships with an Arcinfo license of ArcGIS. Luat asks, will VBA code developed in 8.3 still work well in Arcmap 9.0? Yes, it will. You will find very few problems with your VBA code in 8.3 when you try to run it on 9.0. It works very well. If you've written code in Visual Basic as opposed to VBA, you will have to reference some additional libraries to get that code to work. But VBA is no problem at all. Now I'll pass it back over to Jeremiah.
Okay, well, we're getting a couple questions. Actually, Janet from Sarasota asked one, is can I open an 8.3 project in 9? And other people are also asking about the Geo Databases as well. And yes, you can do this. So if I have 8.3 documents, MXDs, or a 8.3 Geo Database, we can use those directly in ArcGIS 9. Of course, we are adding more functionality to the geodatabases, so there will be an ability to upgrade the geodatabase so you can import all that functionality as well. Okay, great questions, and we'll be having another question and answer period, so let's bring those on in at another time. Okay, let's move on to the third topic here, 3D visualization. Again, as I mentioned, many of us are GIS analysis and we're creating end results. A lot of times these end results are displayed to non-GIS users. Creating powerful 3D displays allow us to really catch people's eyes and they can help better make decisions. So what we're going to look at within this topic are a new ArcGlobe application. Many of you have probably seen little previews of this at last year's user conference, and as well as new ways to render our data through 3D symbology. So new at ArcGIS 9, there will be a new 3D Analyst application called ArcGlobe. Now the 3D Analyst extension existed at 8.3, and you got an application called ArcScene. ArcScene will also be available at 9, but we're also giving you a new application called ArcGlobe. What ArcGlobe does is it allows for 3D viewing and analysis of massive GIS data for the entire world. So what we're getting here is we're getting a snapshot here of the ArcGlobe application with some very powerful data on here. We can have a layer of clouds, a layer of NASA imagery, and put them inside of the globe and spin it around and see it from all different perspectives. What we can also do is we can zoom into very localized areas to get a really fine-grained look at what we're looking at a specific area. So we can zoom in from outer space down to a specific area. We can put in all of the data that we currently use within ArcGIS. So we can put in vector data, we can put in raster data to get very powerful displays. Now, what's really neat about this is we can do all the analysis directly from ArcGlobe. So if I want to perform an identify or a selection, I can do that from ArcGlobe. Even more powerful, I can run all my geoprocessing tools from ArcGlobe. So the entire demo that we just got done showing you, where we were running the clip and the buffer and we ran the model, all those tools could have been run from ArcGlobe, and you could automatically display the results in 3D. So a very powerful tool. We can also display our data in 3D symbols. Now 3D symbols will be available in ArcScene and ArcGlobe. So this is for our vector data. So again, this is just providing 3D users with more enhanced visualization. Beyond than just seeing a globe and the elevation that goes along with it, we can take the actual point representation, line and polygon representation, and give them more interesting and meaningful displays. Give them a more true representation of what they really look like in the real world. So we're going to move on here to another software demonstration today, and we're going to look at ArcGlobe. So what I have popped up right now is ArcGlobe. What it looks like is a very similar looking application to Arcmap, so it's very easy to navigate. What we don't see right now is a very strong, powerful raster data that we saw within the slide a few minutes ago. And this is due to the bandwidth required of ArcGlobe. Many of you probably would not be able to see it today if we had the strong raster data. But typically, that's what the strong powerfulness of ArcGlobe is that we can put very fine-grained data inside this application. So right now, we're just viewing some vector data. Notice that we can spin the globe around to any location. We can also zoom it into any location as well to get a very fine perspective. So I have some friends from Austria and Italy that are in today, so we're going to be going into an area near them. As I start to zoom in, I have scale-dependent rendering that's showing raster data. Again, not very fine detailed data. You could put sub-meter resolution data on here if you want. We can also start to get a different perspective of ArcGlobe. Zoom in to see the horizon of the Earth. Again, zoom in to a very fine location. Put in elevation data so it shows the mountains and topography as well. And also zoom out so we can see the entire world again. So really with ArcGlobe, you kind of have the whole world in your hands. You can make the full representation of your GIS data in 3D and how it would actually appear within the real world. Okay, so let's move on, and we'd like to talk about the new products that are going to be coming out with ArcGIS 9 as well. First, there's going to be the ArcGIS Engine Developer Kit. Now, this is a developer product that will allow developers to create standalone applications. Now, why would a developer want to do this? Well, there's lots of people out there that are performing GIS tasks. but they don't necessarily need a full-fledged ArcGIS desktop on their machine. They're maybe just performing a few focused tasks. Maybe they need some basic map navigation tools, and they're just performing a few edits, maybe just to some utilities. And that's all that their work requires them to do. So a developer can make a very focused application that doesn't have everything a GIS has to offer, but it just has a couple of tools, such as a zoom in, zoom out, maybe a editing tool, maybe include some geocoding as well. So that's what the Engine Developer Kit is for. It's allowing developers to create standalone applications or other functions that are taking advantage of Arc objects, the same technology that builds our software. But you're just taking a piece of them and putting it on a standalone application. So what we see in this slide is a very focused Windows application, where you just might simply want to open up some documents, zoom in, zoom out, maybe do some other type of editing operations. And shortly after the initial ArcGIS 9 release, there will be cross-platform support. So what we see is we have a Java example within this slide. We could potentially make a standalone application that could run on Unix as well and work with an enterprise Geo Database if you want. Similarly, there's also a new product called Arcgis Server. Now, Arcgis Server provides a web developer framework that makes it easy to build GIS web applications and enterprise GIS applications, working with enterprise GIS databases. This supports client-server, GIS web services, and GIS web applications. So why would you want to use this? Again, so users can perform more advanced analysis over the local area network. Essentially what we're doing is we're taking advantage of Arc objects or the other functionalities such as GIS web services through some type of other interface. So what a user could do is they could open up a web browser. They would not need anything installed on their machine at all. They could just open up a web browser and they could start performing GIS tasks through the web browser. The actual GIS task would be hitting another server machine that would actually be performing that functionality. The end user would just see the results in whatever application they're using, such as a web browser. So for instance, maybe you're a dispatcher at a utilities company and you just got a call that a water main broke. You could find that water main, you could perform a network trace to find all associated water mains that are going to be affected, dig into your database, find all the customers that are going to be affected, and call them, send out the person to fix the water main, and so forth. But you don't need anything installed on your machine. Another example is Geo Database Editing through a web application. Again, no software installed, but you're actually performing GIS tasks through a web browser. You just have a simple zoom in, zoom out tool, maybe one or two editing tools that will let you edit a geodatabase, for instance, connecting to an SDE geodatabase. So again, we'd like to recap with what is ArcGIS 9. Again, ArcGIS 9 is really a family of products that work together. Most of the seminar has been ArcGIS Desktop. Again, we have different license levels of a desktop: ArcView, ArcEditor, and Arcinfo, working up on functionality, Arcmap, and Arccatalog. Many new enhancements to the desktop to get your work done. There's also a new product called the ArcGIS Engine Developer Kit, which also makes custom desktop applications. We would also like to remind you there's a free application called ArcReader for basic map navigation tools. Now there are also server products. Many are using ArcSDE, a very powerful product for working with enterprise data. Enhancements have been made to this as well. We were not able to cover them all today. Arcims. Arcims will also be released as Arcims 9, as it is part of this family of products. Arcims is much different than ArcGIS Server. Arcims is and will continue to be a very strong product for publishing data over the internet, whereas ArcGIS Server is more designed for publishing GIS tasks, either by interacting with Arc objects or web services over the internet or local area network as well. So what did we look at? So we saw that ArcGlobe is a very powerful new 3D analyst application. So we can view our data, we can query our data, and we can also make analysis directly from this application. We also saw that there are new 3D symbols that can be used in both ArcGlobe and ArcScene. So we can get more realistic representations of our points, lines, and polygons. ArcGIS Engine Developer Kit is a new product that will be released at ArcGIS 9, allowing developers to create standalone applications for people that don't need everything a GIS has to offer. And again, ArcGIS Server is another new product that allows you to serve up GIS tasks, mainly through Arc objects, through the internet or local area network. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Krista, and we're going to finish it off here with a few questions today.
Lee from Lake Forest is asking, is Model Builder an extension to purchase, or is it included as part of 9.0? Well, Lee, Model Builder is part of the core 9.0 product. You do not need to purchase a separate extension. And actually, Model Builder is available with an ArcView license, an ArcEditor license, and an Arcinfo license. Patty from Bowling Green is asking, will scripting or command line be available in ArcEditor? Well, Patty, scripting, command line, modeling, the whole geoprocessing framework, again, is available with the core ArcGIS 9.0 product. It's available with ArcView, ArcEditor, and Arcinfo. Stuart from Fresno is asking, you're running Arcinfo 9.0. Which geoprocessing tools that you're showing are available only in ArcView 9.0? Well, Stuart, with ArcGIS 9.0, we have more tools available than we do with ArcView 9.0. So the geoprocessing framework is available at all different license levels, but you will get more tools with Arcinfo. For example, with Arcinfo, you get about 251 tools. With ArcEditor, there's 104 tools. With ArcView, there's 102 tools. And then if you purchase additional extensions like Spatial Analyst or 3D Analyst or Geostatistical Analyst, you get some additional tools there as well. Mary Beth from Lincoln is asking, does Python Win come with ArcGIS 9.0? When you install ArcGIS 9.0, you will be installing Python and Python Win. The version is 2.1. Tyler asks, what is the scripting language of choice? Well, you can really write in any scripting language that you want. VB script, JScript, Perl, Python, anything that's supported by COM. However, any samples that ESRI is sending out or any help that you see in the documentation will be showing Python samples. And now I'll turn it back over to Jeremiah.
Great, thanks, Krista. Okay, we're getting a lot of similar questions coming in here. Drew from San Diego asked, will Arcinfo Workstation still be included? Yes, Arcinfo Workstation has been included. Some minor enhancements have been made. So if you get the Arcinfo seat of ArcGIS, you will also get the ability to install Workstation as well. Similar to some other questions, will existing AMLs still be supported from Dennis and Medford? Yes, AMLs will be supported. So of course, Workstation is going to be supported so you can run AMLs. What's really neat and powerful is we can also run AMLs from the interface of ArcGIS now. We saw that we have the ability to create our own custom scripts. We can also place these scripts inside our toolbox. These scripts can point to any one of the supported COM scripting languages, such as a Python or VB script. But they can also point to an AML file. It will require that you have a Workstation installed, but this will make you a little bit of easier transition. Again, we do suggest that there are many enhancements to the Geo Database and many reasons why you should be using the Geo Database. But if you can have a slower transition, this might help you still use your AMLs within the environment directly from Arcmap or Arccatalog, and then you can easily start integrating them into the Geo Database. Okay. Zachary asked, can the geoprocessing tools be used on all data format types? And yes, this is really neat. So if I run the buffer tool that we ran earlier, I didn't really show you what type of data that we were looking at. We were actually looking at all different types of data inside of the Arcmap project. When I ran that buffer tool, that input could have been a shapefile, it could have been a feature class, it could have even been a CAD file. So a lot of the tools automatically accept many different types of inputs on the fly. So that's another enhancement to the tools themselves. They don't really care about what type of data you're working with. Okay, that looks like we're just about out of time for today. So we'd like to direct you into some more resources for further information. If you like today's live training seminar, we also have a new seminar coming up on June 24th entitled What's New in ArcGIS 9 Annotation. Now again, today we only had time just to skim the surface. This seminar will really get into annotation in much more depth and what's new for ArcGIS 9 annotation. There will be a new ESRI Virtual Campus course coming out. If you look on your web browser, there will be a link to this as well. It will be entitled Geoprocessing with ArcGIS 9. This will allow you to learn the full realm of geoprocessing, running tools from the command line as well, creating models, using scripts, so forth. There's also an ESRI Instructor-Led training. We're actually teaching the first class here in a couple weeks. This is a course that Krista and I have been both working on, and it's a 3-day course. We really recommend you to take this course as well, because this will cover all the topics that we saw today in much more detail. So you have an instructor who's been working with the software, and you also get hands-on material to work with the software during those days. Probably the most comprehensive look at what's new in ArcGIS 9 is going to be a PDF out that's called What's New in ArcGIS Desktop 9. Now this will be available when you install the software under the documentation folder, but shortly we will also be putting it up on our support site, support.esri.com, under the knowledge base. And there are also other special events. So there's going to be ArcGIS 9 seminars. These are also going to be a series of seminars that will be coming to a city near you that you can come. And these will be nearly day-long seminars where you can get an ESRI representative that will show you much more in-depth look at what's new in ArcGIS 9. So we'd like to thank all of you for attending today on behalf of ESRI. We hope you enjoyed today's seminar.